Okay, now earlier we used the language of eternal objects. Okay, this is the term that Whitehead uses for possibilities. Okay, he doesn't demand we use the term. It's probably caused more harm than good in terms of interpreting his thought. But we'll get to that in a sec. So he says that the metaphysical status of an eternal object is a possibility for actuality. Okay, every occasion, he says, remember we're talking about the fundamental events at the base of things. Every occasion is defined as to its character by how these possibilities are actualized for that occasion. So let's talk about just the language for a second here. So he calls eternal objects because they don't have subjectivity. They're not subjects unto themselves. They're not undergoing becoming, right? He calls them eternal because they're immutable. In some sense, they transcend the temporal dimension. Again, we're sort of in this Platonic metaphysical sphere, right? They do not themselves become, but they're ingredients. They're essential for the becoming of each and every event, the becoming of each and every life, the becoming of each and every cosmos. And notice also this, we're back to this distinction between permanence, eternity, and temporality and change. Or again, Whitehead is saying they have an essential relationship to one another. Okay, he even tells us that if we don't like the phraseology of eternal objects, just simply call them pure potentials. They're the pure potentials of the universe. Okay, they've always been there. Presumably, they always will be there in a deep sense. And each entity, each human life is going to differ in how we actualize the potentials that are harbored in the nature of things. Okay, let's give a couple examples. Again, this is a complicated discussion. There's been a lot of argument over it, but let's at least think a little bit. So one might be some mathematical possibilities and truths, okay? Say geometrical realities, triangles, squares, facts of mathematics, true and 2 equal 4. Okay, some people want to say we purely invent these things, right? And that mathematics is just to play with symbols. And yet many physicists are going to say, nope, right? These things are discovered. They're there. Even if we are not, right? Even if these truths, or even if we were gone, these truths seem to be there. Okay, that might be an example of a kind of eternal object, mathematical object. Okay, Whitehead talks about colors. We mentioned that earlier, like green or blue, for example. He says a color is eternal. It haunts time like a spirit. It comes and it goes, but where it comes, it is the same color. Whitehead is always very poetic. The sense in which the spectrum of colors that we see exemplified in the world pass away and come back, and there's a sense of eternity to them. We want to say, even if things weren't here, this spectrum of colors would be there. We might also think of a spectrum of sound, right? This entire language of music. We think again to this quote earlier about the composer, these infinitudes of possibility of how he could construct this orchestra and this beautiful piece are there. And it's stubborn. What does it mean that those are there, that we seem to face this reality? Okay, another example would be simply possible states of affairs and experiences that might be, okay, but that are not current, that are not yet, right? So we seem to face this stubborn difficulty of possibilities being utterly essential to our experience. And we contemplate them and we face them in different ways for better or for worse. Okay, but are these Platonic forms? We've mentioned this sort of Platonic essence that Whitehead seems to be hinting at. And Whitehead does say that the meaning of eternal objects, or these pure potentials, corresponds to Platonic-like forms or ideas, okay? Yet he's really clear that he wants to distance himself from Plato as well. He doesn't want to simply restate what Plato says. So he says that they're not necessarily restricted to those which Plato would recognize as forms. Rather, he has a great statement, it's too long to quote, where he asks us to think about what Plato might have affirmed if he were advanced by 20 centuries of philosophy and science. Okay, so eternal objects are the kind of things that Plato would have affirmed, perhaps, in the 20th century if he were here. But notice that Whitehead is not at all taking the Platonic move and saying that static reality, right, it's only static if you abstract it, is more real. It's a better reality, has an eminent reality to it, that the world is just a dim or imperfect shadow. He's not making that claim. In fact, for Whitehead, the world of possibility are forms of process. They pour like fluid into the world at every single moment. And this realm requires what Whitehead calls ingression into occasions to be actualized at all. Possibilities, in other words, are nothing without their weddedness to being actualized by actual entities, by events, by human purposes. They don't simply exist in some void, they have to be actualized in the world. And what that means is that the world is not some shadow. It's actually the indispensable context in which this realm of possibility finds any true reality at all. Okay, that's quite a step away from Plato to say that this is an independent realm that is, well, superior in a real way. Whitehead says it's a realm that's needed, but its relationship to the world was misconceived, it was misunderstood. He wants to say there's a fundamental relationship between possibility and actuality. Okay, I know this is tense, this is difficult. These are questions